Sports anime probably has more S-tier ranked shows than any other genre, and Marvel has countless S-tier ranked movies. So what would happen if Marvel made a sports anime? Well, you get a show that bends over every other sports anime with better writing than Haikyuu, more hype than Blue Lock, and better action than Baby. And that's why Inazuma 11 is that anime, because we start with them literally forming the Avengers with some of the most well-written characters in sports anime, then fighting their version of Loki with some of the best storytelling I've ever seen, and it ends with the greatest match in sports anime against Thanos himself, and it all begins with a man trying to murder a group of kids over a football match. No, seriously, let me explain. Yes, this is a football anime, and no, I will not at any point use the S word, which is tough because it's everywhere in the show. It's about a football-obsessed boy who is the son of a legendary goalkeeper and is trying to take one of the worst teams in the country to the very top of the football frontier. There's a lot that happens, including a literal alien invasion. We start the show with a match between Royal Academy and a team that the show doesn't even bother to come up with a name for. And it turns out, for some reason, if you lose to Royal, your team has to be disbanded. In fact, Royal will personally do it for you by literally steamrolling it. Fun. And that brings us to Raimon High, who don't have the best of football teams, but the captain and goalkeeper, Endo, wants to challenge for this year's football frontier. But they can't exactly do that because they only have 7 players. And they can't even find a place to practice. So instead, Endo practices against elementary school kids, and one of them almost ends up hitting these 2 distinguished gentlemen. But it's all good because they're really chill about it and... Anyway, the child abuse continues and this little rat is about to take a ball to the face, but luckily, a completely irrelevant bystander who definitely isn't important at all saves the day. Endo asks his savior if he wants to play with them, but he just gives him a side eye and leaves, probably because he's not that important to the rest of the show. Or maybe he is, because he ends up transferring to Raimon. Endo tries again to recruit him, but Goenji actually quit football at the ripe old age of 12 years old. Endo gets called to the principal's office where he thinks the club is going to get disbanded, but the principal, who always has his eyes closed for some reason, tells him that they're going to be playing a match against none other than Royal Academy, the team that won the football frontier 40 years in a row. Endo complains that they only have 7 members, but Natsumi, who is the school director's daughter, tells him to suck it up and find some more. Now these 2 are polar opposites and are already butting heads, so I'm sure you all already know how this is gonna end. Endo starts looking for 4 more players and his hunt leads him back to none other than Goenji, who's pretty clearly getting pissed off by Endo's sales pitches. Endo starts to train using his dead granddad's notebook that only he can read, and in most cases you'd say this is some pretty unconventional training, but in the context of anime this is pretty standard, so I don't really even have much else to say other than Kazamaru from the field club likes Endo's passion, so he decides to join the club, bringing the total up to 8 members, and they're all here watching Endo and Kazamaru fall in love and soon join in on the training session, because if there's one thing that's true about football, it's that you can learn it in just one evening. That brings us to match day, where this guy and this guy join the team, and naturally neither of them have ever played football either. The Royal Academy players then arrive on a literal red carpet, and in typical anime fashion, they can move faster than the eye can see, because of course they can. It wouldn't be an anime without some preteens doing some superhuman things. And speaking of superhuman, Endo is going to have to do something miraculous soon because the team still only has 10 players and it's almost time for kickoff. Luckily, Aki arrives with 4 eyes, who's more than happy to play the hero that saves the day. But why are Royal here in the first place? After all, just like Natsumi says, they're way better than Raimon, so why waste their time? It looks like quite a few people aren't sure about this, including this detective who somehow manages to get into school without anyone seeing him, which should be raising some alarms. Apparently, the commander Kageyama wants to see the strength of a certain player for himself. The game finally kicks off and Raimon get off to a surprisingly good start, though I'm surprised half these players can even dribble in a straight line. I mean, the first time he's kicked a ball in his life was yesterday, and this guy can somehow jump 30 feet into the air, but I won't question that since this is an anime and logic be damned. Obviously he doesn't score because that would be boring, but that's not important. Look at this. Does this not look like it's over the line? Hell, this one definitely looks like it's in the back of the net, but apparently I must be going blind. But at least this means Raimon have a chance. Well, one goal isn't the end of the world. There's still plenty of time to... This isn't even a match anymore. This is full-on abuse. But I'll allow it because it means we get to see our first special move. And And let's be honest,
That's pretty metal.
and we get to see a lot more special moves, which are mainly used to abuse Raimon and less to score goals. But if I showed you every move, this video would end up being 20 hours long. And besides, Royal make it pretty clear they don't even really need to use special moves to abuse the players. So naturally, this guy, whose name I genuinely don't remember, ends up running off the pitch, so Raimon are now down to 10 players and are losing 20-0. But Endo still refuses to give up, and that seems to be enough to sway a certain student to join the, well, I was going to call it a match, but I think we can all agree this is anything but a football match at this point.
彼はもしや昨年のフットボールフロンティアで1年生ながらその強烈なシュートで一躍ヒーローとなった高円寺修也
Now there's a lot of indicators in anime that someone is about to do something really badass, but the best one is probably wearing your colors up. But then again, wearing a literal cape is also up there. Speaking of up there, Royal get ready to do another death zone, but that's okay because Goenji is there to stop it. Okay, never mind. It turns out Goenji doesn't need to help because he believes in Endo, which is probably not the smartest thing to do considering he's let in 20 goals. But then again, considering what comes next, I can't complain. Really makes you think why he didn't try and stop the other 20 goals, but at least he stopped this one. And not only did he stop it, he throws the ball all the way up the pitch to Goenji, so we get to see yet another iconic special move. And just like that, Raimon win. Never mind, they're still losing by 19 goals. Huh, well I guess that turned out pretty well. But not as well as you might think, because Goenji straight up hands in his 2-week notice and leaves. But Endo isn't one to get discouraged, so he decides it's best that they address some weaknesses in the team. And if the last game is anything to go by, this is going to be a long session. Especially because Somioka is not so subtly jealous of Goenji. But their club meeting is cut short by a surprise visitor who tells the team about their next game. Apparently, because they beat Royal Academy, there's hundreds of schools lining up wanting to play them, and their next opponent is going to be Occult Junior High, which is quite the name for a school. And just like always, if they lose, their club is disbanded. But if they win, Natsumi will enter them into the football frontier, which decides the best football team in the country. But it turns out the Occult's actual request to play Raimon was pretty creepy, saying they'd curse them if they refused. The club remember they're an actual football club and actually have to train every once in a while, and we see Somioka really struggling to cope with the skill gap between him and Goenji. And that's about the time that Haruna joins in to tell the team how weird Occult really is. When anyone tries to score, their legs stop working. Now I'm no expert, but Rule 2 and Rule 3 kinda seem to contradict one another. How are they ever in losing positions if no one can score against them? Yeah, I know, I'm reading too much into a football anime aimed at children. So let's focus on their training session again. Endo continues training to try and learn a new special move, and this is where we really get to see him act like a captain. He says that the team see Goenji as a hero, and football shouldn't be played with one person, but 11. So he isn't going to ask him to join the team again. And yet he still ends up following him to the hospital of all places, but Goenji is visiting his sister who's in a coma. Now I know I said this was a kids show, but strap in for this story. Goenji was in the Football Frontier final with his old school against Royal Academy, and his sister was really excited to watch him play. But on the way to the game, she was in a serious car accident, and Goenji ended up missing the game to rush to see her, but found her in a coma. Now there's a lot more to this story later on, and it gets surprisingly dark. And after that, there's even more to the story, which gets really dark. But let's focus on Raimon's training again, where Endo promises to help Somioka learn a special move like Goenji's Fire Tornado. And surprise, surprise, after a few days of hard work, he learns Dragon Crash. And Goenji is there to see it, where he runs into Natsumi. Well, runs into is probably not quite accurate, considering she did a background check on him and studied the routes he takes to get home, which is definitely not creepy. She asks him why he ever played football in the first place, which makes him realize it's actually for his sister. And you can probably see where all of this is going, so let's just skip ahead to the day of the match, and if that's not the creepiest bunch of 12-year-olds you've ever seen, then I don't know what is. Occult start the game off, but are surprised to see how good Endo actually is. And if anyone's ever actually played the Inazuma 11 games, you'll know how painful it is that he used this damn move so early on. I'm pretty sure it costs like 45 25 points, which is a lot. And speaking of special moves, so Miyoka uses his new Dragon Crash to score the first goal not once, but twice. And that's when the coach does a literal 180, and you really appreciate how appropriate the name Haikyuu is. He starts chanting, which messes with Raimon's vision, and they end up marking each other before they're frozen in place by Occult's Ghost Lock, which gives them an easy goal. And on the other side of the pitch, the keeper has his own special move, which easily stops Dragon Crash, which should again make you wonder why these damn goalkeepers don't just use their special moves from the start. The game carries on this way until Occult take the lead just before the start of the second half, where things only go from bad to worse as the teams start arguing with each other. But it looks like Endo has a plan and manages to stop their chanting somehow. I'll be honest, I have no clue what he did here, but we get to see his new special move, so once again, I won't complain. But I'm sure you're wondering what the hell's going on, so I'll do my best to explain. Occult messes with Raimon's vision with their constantly changing formation. While that was happening, their coach was sending subliminal messages to make them stop moving in what's effectively a double hypnosis. So when Endo said rumble rumble break, it snapped everyone out of the hypnosis. Now I know that makes no sense at all, but considering these kids can jump 20 feet in the air, I think we can allow it. Raimon then go on the counterattack, and Goenji figures out that their keeper is using hypnosis to knock the strikers off balance to weaken their shots. So their solution is to work together, and we get to see the second combined special move in the show. It turns out there are quite a few people watching this game, including some really important characters who will meet in a couple episodes, and so Miyoka and Goenji combine to win the game with Dragon Crash, securing Raimon's place in the football frontier, which is deadass one of the best sports tournaments in anime. But before we get into those matches, I think it's important to talk about how Inazuma 11 is easily the weirdest sports anime ever. And I don't mean weird as in JoJo's or Baki. I mean weird as in we go from a young boy trying to revive his school's dead football club to this guy attempting to murder a group of 12-year-olds over a sports tournament. And then they basically fight gods who aren't actually gods but just kids on drugs, to then fighting aliens who aren't actually aliens but kids being powered by a meteorite, to eventually traveling through time and fighting actual aliens. But let's focus on that first part for now. This guy, who looks a lot like Dr. Doofenshmirtz, is so sick in the head that he gets someone to cut the brakes in the Raimon team bus. Please just take a moment to think about what I said. This grown adult wants to win a children's sports competition so badly that he is willing to kill about 20 kids. Now I want you to close your eyes for a second and pretend you're out watching a middle school sports event. It can be anything: football, basketball, volleyball, hell, even Now imagine one of the parents see their kids losing, so he decides to shoot the other kid in the face. That's basically what Kageyama does. But he isn't really Thanos. He's the one who ends up creating Thanos. But to understand how we get there, we get to experience the absolute cinema that is the football frontier, the competition that decides the best team in the country. Now this competition is anything but a straightforward tournament. This isn't Haikyuu where we have actual strategy and character arcs, but somehow it's still some of the wackiest and most entertaining anime I've ever watched. But then again, the way the teams are picked should already tell you how weird this thing's going to be. Why are they wearing literal bunny heads? It's one thing to wear a bunny suit, but having the actual head should raise some eyebrows. And this is the coach of the team Raimon will be playing in the first round. Do I even need to comment on this? They definitely knew what they were doing with this shot. But in all seriousness, Endo and Aki's relationship is really wholesome. It's kind of surprising this show even has a B plot. Or I guess it's more accurate to call it a D or an E plot. There's this whole kind of will they, won't they between Endo and Aki and Natsumi. In the second game, you can even pick which of the two you go on a date with. I mean, you can pick Haruna too, but even she'd call you an idiot for doing that. And speaking of idiots, this guy has to be the worst coach in history. I've never seen a coach that so openly hates his team. He's like Jose Mourinho without any of the aura. He even wonders why this new kid wants to join the team, and as you'll find out later, he has a pretty good reason. He also knows Aki from when they were kids, which you'd think is important, but it really isn't. He tells the team that their next opponent, Wild Junior High, are really good in the air, so the team have to come up with a new special move that will give them a fighting chance. Their search for a new move leads them to hunting down a secret notebook, and it turns out that Endo actually knows how to crack open safes. I'm just going to have to make a rule to not question what this guy does, because apparently he can counter hypnosis and somehow break open safes. And that's without talking about all the stuff he does in Ares and Orion. Oh wait, never mind, I kind of just jumped the gun. He doesn't actually know how to open safes. But luckily, Natsumi is more than willing to help them get to what's inside. But who does this notebook even belong to? Well, it's none other than the legendary Inazuma 11. They were pretty much one of the best teams in the world 40 years ago, coached by Endo's grandfather. But when he asks his mom about them, she pretends not to know, which is pretty suspicious, but not as suspicious as the fact that Domon is literally a Royal Academy spy. They didn't even wait a little bit to hold off on that piece of information. We literally find out he's a spy less than 15 minutes after he's introduced. But that's not even close to the weirdest thing, because it turns out that the special move they're looking for involves Goenji literally jumping off Kageyama's belly like a trampoline. Look, I'm gonna be honest with you, there's a bunch of character development in between, with Kageyama being afraid of heights but wanting to work hard for both the team and his brother. And Natsumi questions why everyone is so passionate about football, only to fall in love with the sport herself without even realizing it. But we both know you're not here for narrative structure and character development, so let's skip ahead to the day of the match where we meet Wild Junior High, who are somehow even weirder than Occult. This guy looks like the love child of that one guy from Naruto and James from Pokemon. And this guy doesn't even have eyebrows. He just has I don't even know what that is. It's like he's gone Super Saiyan 3. All in all, the rest of the students are actually pretty normal, and the school is drop dead gorgeous. Like, can you imagine going to school here instead of somewhere like this? I could do without this guy though. I'm assuming he's speaking another language because his students can actually understand him, and they give Raimon a real run for their money, with Goenji unable to use his fire tornado thanks to their amazing jumping, and they counter pretty easily. But luckily, Endo is still the GOAT and is able to take care of things. Unfortunately, they still struggle to find the back of the net, with Somioka spraining his ankle and Domon taking his place. And it turns out he's actually pretty good, and wait a minute, isn't that a Royal Academy move? How is no one suspicious? The game continues with both teams going back and forth, and Endo just about keeping Raimon in the game with save after save. But hey, last time out they were losing about 10-0, so this is a big improvement. The second half continues in the same way as the first, with the team failing to perfect the Inazuma drop, and Endo shows us why he's the GOAT. Seriously, this kid is basically the Lionel Messi of goalkeepers. I sure hope they never decide it's boring to have him in net and move him outfield. Seeing Endo and the rest of the team working so hard gives Kageyama the motivation he needs to overcome his fear of heights, and we finally get to see them perfect the Inazuma drop. I know this video is getting kinda long, but I can't not show this wholesome moment between Natsumi and Endo. Besides, it's kinda important later on because she ends up becoming a manager. I really question what this girl does all day. We never see her in class, she's always just chilling in the principal's office, and after school she just watches Raimon practice. But then again, it ends up being pretty useful because she bans the team from practicing special moves in public so they don't get spied on. I still don't understand why people are taking a children's football tournament so seriously that they are doing a high-tech CIA level analysis. And speaking of high tech, their next opponent, Brainwashing Junior High, have a augmented reality system where they prepare to play Raimon. And yes, you heard that right. This school is literally called Brainwashing, and somehow that's even weirder than being named Occult. And not only have they run simulations on how to stop all of Raimon's moves, including Goenji's fire tornado, but they can even copy them. Do you know how much aura you need to have to be able to not only steal Goenji's move, but also his theme song? I have to put this guy in S tier just for that. Also, if anyone disagrees with this tier list, please know that you are wrong and you should take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror. Like, how can I put this guy any higher? Have you seen his hair? How do you even do that? And he's not the only one with a weird hairstyle, because Raimon's chairman isn't much better. Honestly, I can't decide which one of these two is worse. But luckily, Natsumi's father over here makes up for his bad trim by helping Natsumi discover these secret rooms under the school. Seriously, how do you even forget something like this? It turns out that these secret rooms are the training center of the legendary Inazuma 11. Imagine being so good that your school digs out thousands of cubic meters under the main building just to create a training facility for you. Let's just take a minute to think about how much this would cost and where the hell they got the money from. But let's also remember Natsumi is the one that found it, and that's why she's the GOAT. The facility is less of a training center and more of a prison, because it doesn't let you leave until you finish the training. And if you thought using tires to train was weird, you haven't seen anything yet. From a car trying to run you over to a literal machine gun to whatever this is, it's fair to say the training is less than conventional. And the only question is if it's made made the team strong enough to fight against Brainwashing Junior High. So let's find out by skipping ahead to match day, where Brainwashing start off by doing that typical anime trope where they just don't move, leaving their opponent all puzzled until they come out of nowhere to turn the tables on them. But the thing is, I don't think there's any dirty play involved here. I mean, Occult literally hypnotized them, but Brainwashing are just following their coach's orders. It's pretty normal actually. Hell, if anything, it's super impressive how well they can carry out his commands. They even position themselves in a way that they use their bodies to slow down Dragon Crash before it reaches the keeper. That's really impressive. I can't even hate on it. But Raimon are pretty impressive too. It's clear their training has actually paid off because Goenji's Fire Tornado is able to break through Shot Pocket even if he doesn't score. But their keeper takes it up a level with a new special move. Luckily, he isn't the only world-class keeper on the pitch, as Endo does a pretty good job of stopping Brainwashing until they end up tricking him with some pretty clever play. And then it's like I'm watching Team Y versus Team Z in Blue Lock because Brainwashing are happy with passing it around and running down the clock. And hey, I can't argue with that either. The game's the game. Everyone's really distraught and they've all lost hope in winning the game, except for Natsumi the GOAT, who still believes Raimon have got this. One thing I didn't quite understand is how everyone hates Brainwashing for relying on data and playing in a way that's unsportsmanlike. But I really don't see the problem here. The point of the game isn't to be the most entertaining team, it's to win. In fact, in the second half, they're given orders by Kageyama to physically crush Raimon, and they flat out refuse to follow through with it. I don't understand why everyone hates them. They're easily one of my favorite teams. But enough of my little rant, let's get back to the match where Endo wins the ball back, joins the attack, and actually takes a pretty good shot. It makes Takeshi realize there's more to football than just winning, and he goes against his coach's orders and commands his team to attack. And this is probably the first thing he's done that I don't agree with. My guy, there's like 10 minutes left and you're winning. Just do your thing and win the game. But no, he wants to have fun, and it results in Raimon taking the goal back with a new special move. It just goes to show you should always listen to Natsumi because the team are now way more athletic and capable than they were before. And just as you'd expect, Raimon end up winning with Dragon Tornado, which is pretty weird because Takeshi stopped that move before, so I'm not really sure why it went in this time, but I've learned my lesson to try and find the logic behind the stuff in this show. And it looks like Kageyama is also done with all this bullshit because he abandons Brainwashing's coach, leading to their coach abandoning Brainwashing, which then leads to a really entertaining end-to-end game with both teams giving it their all. And then we get one of the sickest moments of the whole show where Arata stops Goenji's Fire Tornado with his own Fire Tornado. Not only that, but he still manages to head the ball to safety. Please tell me again how this guy isn't in S tier. It even motivates Takeshi to run down the pitch and take a shot, which makes me question why the goalkeepers are so good at dribbling that nobody can ever tackle them. But like I said before, this show doesn't care about logic. Now I know the main point of the episode is how Goenji is injured and won't be able to play in the semi-finals, but let's just take a minute to look at the episode title. I mean, come on, they had to have known what they were doing there. It turns out that Raimon's next opponent, Otaku Junior High, are one of the weakest teams in the tournament, but somehow end up beating Occult. So naturally, the team decide to scout out their opposition for some more information by visiting a spot Otaku normally frequent, a maid cafe. Now, I'm not gonna say I haven't been to a maid cafe before, don't ask questions, but it's pretty obvious Kakeru, aka Willy, has. In fact, he's such a natural that these two distinguished gentlemen invite him and the rest of the team to the basement, which should raise a lot of red flags, but clearly common sense is just as absent as logic is in this anime. There's a whole bunch of nerdy shit down here, but the important thing to note is that these guys are actually the Otaku team, and Raimon feel a little relieved that for the first time, their opponents actually seem pretty underwhelming. But then that raises the question, how did they beat Occult? Well, we're going to find out on the day of the match where Kakeru replaces the injured Goenji. And you'd think that could spell trouble because obviously Goenji is way better, but it's actually not that big of a deal because Otaku are pretty bad. But they still managed to end the first half at 0-0 because Raimon aren't used to playing against people who are so weird. And that's saying something considering they played against a team of farm animals. Surprisingly, the weirdest person here isn't actually a player, but the coach himself. Now you might be wondering, Mocha, why is it weird for a man to mind his own business and eat watermelons? Well, I'll tell you. It's because this grown-ass man has set a rule that all managers must dress as maids. And no, I don't just mean Otaku's managers, who are all literal children, mind you. He wants the underage opposition managers to also dress as maids. And as you can imagine, Natsumi isn't so thrilled by that, but the other two don't really seem to care, and it's pretty much business as usual for them as the team get ready for the second half. And that's when I'd argue things get even weirder. It turns out Otaku were just conserving their energy and actually can play decent football, but they still use a bunch of dirty tricks like swapping the ball out with a watermelon and moving the entire goal each time Raimon shoots. Luckily, Kakeru is able to figure this out, but not before Otaku score the first goal with the weirdest shot I've ever seen. Like, can you just imagine your mate picked you up and used you like a baseball bat? Actually, that would actually be pretty sick. But I'd argue this isn't even the weirdest move we've seen, as Somioka and Kakeru combine to score a goal with whatever the hell this is. This is actually a real move in the games. It's not a good one, but hey, it's there. It results in Kakeru having to be stretched off, but seeing his passion motivates Otaku to play properly, which gives Raimon the chance they need to take the lead and secure their spot in the finals of the Football Frontier Qualifiers, where they will be playing none other than Royal Academy. And this is easily the best game of the qualifiers, only beaten by one other game. Because trust me, there is no reason at all for Inazuma 11 to be this amazing. It's a 2008 anime that's an adaptation of a game series, and it goes from a group of kids fighting against the odds to win a football tournament to eventually traveling through time, fighting aliens, and uncovering a deep-rooted evil government plot. It's ridiculous, but it just does so many things right in a way other sports anime can only hope to. But what even makes a good sports anime? Chances are you watch sports anime because you like sports or anime, usually both. It's a genre of anime that has the unique appeal of combining the tension and drama of competition with compelling characters and narratives. And when it comes to characterization, the likes of Haikyuu, Hajime no Ippo, Aoashi, and even Blue Lock are king. There's also the narrative aspect, where again, Hajime no Ippo and Ace of Diamond really shine. And finally, there's the pure hype of Kuroko no Basket that we literally salivate at the mouth over. But Inazuma 11 excels in pretty much all of these categories, even though it really shouldn't. We can all agree it has a banger opening. But for all intents and purposes, it is a kids show. It's goofy, ridiculous, and over the top. Right? Wrong. Well, technically those things are true, but I'm going to show you that it has better psychological depth than Blue Lock, better character relationships than Haikyuu, better emotional resonance than Hajime no Ippo, and of course, even more hype than Kuroko no Basket. And I'll show you all of this using just one game from the entire series. Raimon versus Royal Academy. This is one of the most popular matches in the show. Everything from the build-up to the final kick is utterly stunning, and I'd argue very underappreciated. It involves betrayals, plot twists, a literal murder attempt, a single line of dialogue that I genuinely believe is some of the best writing I have ever seen in any anime, and some brilliant foreshadowing. And that's without talking about the match itself, which not only has some of the most hype moments in the series, but also deals with a surprisingly layered issue, with Endo struggling to find himself because of a mental conflict caused by a very clever and expertly executed plot twist. But we can't talk about why this match and this twist is so good without understanding the genius behind the very intentional plot points that come before it. I'd say it's a little similar to how in Haikyuu you can only really appreciate the true stakes of the Shiratorizawa game after you've seen the team losing to Seijo, reinventing themselves through 5 more games, and finally beating Seijo in an incredibly hard-earned victory. And only after all of that have we earned the right to watch the Shiratorizawa game. Except it isn't like that at all. It's better. Let me explain. Just like how Karasuno play Seijo twice in an official game, Raimon also play Royal Academy twice. The difference being while one game was close, the other wasn't. The show uses this opportunity to set up Royal as this unstoppable force that have won the football frontier 40 years in a row. In this sense, they're similar to Shiratorizawa, with a psychotic evil genius as their coach. But the thing is, other than this match, the build-up to this game happens in just 3 episodes instead of over multiple seasons like in Haikyuu. That shouldn't really work. It isn't enough time to establish complex plot points and have the viewer invested. But if you've watched the show, ask yourself if you are invested. Chances are you were. Here's why. In Haikyuu, it takes 15 episodes for Karasuno to play their first official game. In Inazuma 11, it takes 6. In fact, there are 5 matches in just the first 11 episodes, pretty much a match every other episode. Now, I'm not saying one of these is better than the other. Haikyuu is and will always be my favorite sports anime. Inazuma 11 just has a slightly different audience, so it does things slightly differently. But boy, do they make it work. And it's incredible how they do it in such a short amount of time. And part of this is because after non-stop action, we're given 3 entire episodes of break before the Royal Academy game. But it isn't perfect. At least not narratively. To show you what I mean, let's quickly run through what's happened so far before the Royal Academy match. Raimon play Occult who hypnotized them, but Endo breaks through it thanks to anime bullshit. Then they play Farm and beat them using the Inazuma drop, which takes a while for them to get right. Remember this move because it's very important. They then play Brainwashing, which is my favorite game in the entire show, and Raimon win using the Inazuma 1, which they kinda pull out their ass, and it's my only complaint about the show. Regardless, their next opponent are Otaku Junior High and their pedophile coach, and they end up winning thanks to some heroics from a player who up until this point was just a bench warmer. These matches are really fun and incredibly hype, but narratively speaking, it's kind of all over the place. Nothing here really sets up for or is even relevant to the Royal Academy game, except for one thing that's been built up throughout. And after this, the show takes it to the next level. So what is that one thing? Well, it all starts with Royal's very own spy, Domon. When he first joined the club, he almost seemed proud of the fact he was a Royal Academy spy. But after spending time with Endo and the team, he begins to resent what he has to do, almost to the point of him getting run over. I have no idea how Aki is somehow always in the right place at the right time, but it's a really good thing she stopped him. Not because it saved his life, that would be too simple, but because we get some lore drop. And we also get to see some pretty good character development for Domon, and it doesn't seem unrealistic because of how gradual it is. And the show does a great job of building on this with the next scene that involves Aki. She notes that Domon doesn't seem like himself during training, but instead of interfering herself, she asks Haruna to do it. This is some amazing writing, and it's practically done with just one line. Aki is Domon's childhood friend. Realistically, there's nobody better to talk to him, but she also understands that maybe the fact they're so close is getting in the way of Domon being able to open up, so she selflessly sends Haruna instead. Who knew this goofy ass show could be serious too? Sending Haruna is also a fantastic way to transition into the next scene where we're given a huge plot twist.
Raimon 中の偵察にでも来たの？待って！
俺とお前は会っちゃいけないんだよ。
I remember first watching this and having my mind blown. And for those that have watched the show, you'll know this little revelation plays a huge part in the upcoming game. But if you thought this revelation was crazy, you haven't seen anything yet. Domon soon finds out that the Raimon coach, who we already know is working for Kageyama, has done something to the team bus.
なあ、一つだけ忠告しておきますよ。このバスには乗らないことです。
This part always makes me wonder if he would have told Domon about the bus sabotage if Domon hadn't walked in on him. Like, if Domon hadn't found out, would the coach have just let Domon die? It's a pretty scary thought, but not anywhere near as scary as what Kageyama has planned. But before we get to that, we see the team coming up with some new special moves, which is cool and all, and you can pause to check out this tier list, but the main focus is what the hell Natsumi read in this letter that has her so terrified. Luckily, the best girl in the show doesn't piss about and forces the coach to test drive the team bus. Can I just ask why this girl has so much power? I know she's the chairman's daughter and all, but forcing a teacher to do something seems a bit much. But then again, this is one of the funniest insults I've ever heard. It turns out he drained the brake fluids from the team bus so Raimon would be badly injured in an accident on the way to their next game, which makes me ask the question, why is junior football so important in this anime that adults conspire to literally murder children? And why the hell does Natsumi have the power to fire teachers? And before the coach leaves, he tells the rest of the team that Domon is a spy too. And this is where, in my opinion, the show has some of its best writing. And I'm not talking about good for the standards of Inazuma 11 writing. I mean that the next few scenes are genuinely up there with some of the best of Haikyuu. Endo still defends Domon, which speaks volumes of his character, but that isn't something that's new to us. But these little interactions tell us a lot about the rest of the characters. For starters, when Aki finally finds Domon, she doesn't bring up what happened. She doesn't blame or even try to reassure him. She just talks to him about football because that's what makes him comfortable. And then Domon finally opens up, saying that he loves playing with Endo because he never has to chase him. He can always run beside him, which makes it feel like he can keep moving forward. I'm sorry, but when did the writing of this show get this good? This is something similar to what Takeda would say in Haikyuu, and that's a huge compliment. And just like Aki, Endo is more than happy to remind Domon that he still has his friends. He doesn't ask him any questions or try to make him feel better. He just plays football with him. And that's when we get the best line of dialogue I have ever seen in this show. And I'm not even gonna say anything. Just pay attention to this conversation.
あなたはドモン君のこと気づいてたんじゃない？
遠藤も気づいてたさ。ドモンのサッカーへの熱い気持ちをね。
I have no idea what ingredients the writers used to cook up this fire script, but it really goes a long way in showing that yes, Inazuma 11 can be wacky and funny, it can even be hype, but it can also be incredibly heartwarming too. In fact, if you hadn't watched a single minute of the show and only watched this scene, this line alone would tell you all you need to know about the kind of person Endo is. That's genuinely brilliant writing. And it's just one of the many reasons so many people love this anime. It has it all, including the most common anime trope you can think of. And no, I don't mean unnecessary fanfare. I mean tragic backstories. When Domon and Aki were living in the States, which is also where most of you guys are from, but for some reason you don't want to subscribe, which is fine, whatever. They had a friend called Ichinose who was really good and on the American youth national team. And I'm sure any anime fan can figure out what happened next. This puppy was about to be run over, but Ichinose saved him and got turned into a shoe. It's a good thing this isn't an isekai anime, although I wouldn't mind watching That Time I Got Reincarnated as an Aglet. And the thing is, none of this is random. Every single scene has a point, and the writers drip feed us with just the right amount of information so that we can piece things together on our own. By remembering his promise to Ichinose, Domon rejoins the team, but things aren't quite perfect, as there's one more twist to the tale, and that is the fact that Raimon aren't allowed to compete without a coach.
ライモン夏美が頼めば誰かやってくれるんじゃないか。そもそもあんたが不愉快を追い出さなきゃこんなことにはならなかったんだ。
Okay, first of all, I can't believe this guy has the nerve to blame my angel. She literally saved everyone's life. But yeah, they still desperately need a coach. And I'm going to save you guys the trouble and cut out an entire episode by telling you it's the noodle shop owner who used to be the goalkeeper for the legendary Inazuma 11. It's not that this stuff is boring, it's actually a lot of fun, and we find out a lot more lore about the original Inazuma 11. But in the context of the Royal Academy match, there's something else that plays a much bigger role, and half of it involves Royal's captain. The show uses the build-up to the match to expertly express Kidou's inner conflict. They don't tell us too much right away, but we are given a little bit of backstory. Now I'll admit, this is all pretty basic stuff where he was an orphan that got scouted by Kageyama. That's cool and all, but when have you ever seen a 6-year-old hit a bicycle kick this clean? Now I'll get to his full character development later, but he eventually goes to watch Raimon train, and I just wanted to highlight this little bit of animation where Aki notices the look on Haruna's face when she sees Kidou, but doesn't say anything. It's super subtle, and it's stuff like that that makes this show so good. In fact, Kidou and Haruna's relationship is never resolved before the match. It's actually weaved into the game itself, which forces Kidou to juggle two problems. The first is obviously his relationship with his sister, which we'll learn more about in a bit. But the next one involves uncovering one of the craziest plots I've ever seen in sports anime. At first, Kidou is feeling conflicted because he wants to play fairly against Endo, but he also recognizes that he needs to win. This is some pretty good character development because it's gradual and he has actual tangible reasons to feel conflicted. But when he voices these thoughts to Kageyama, we get one of the most important and layered lines in the whole show. If you spit on gods, they'll rain on you later. First of all, this is just a cold ass line. And secondly, for those that have already watched the show, you probably know how this is a subtle hint at what's to come. But it also very cleverly sets up another game that is, in my opinion, one of the best matches in sports anime. But you're going to have to wait a little bit for both of these things because Kidou thinks he's Sherlock Holmes and tries to figure out what Kageyama is planning. And trust me, It's insane. And he's not the only one trying to get to the bottom of things, as half the city's police force is investigating the stadium. Between this and the CIA level analysis before the brainwashing game, I really don't understand why they take youth football so seriously. It really shouldn't be that deep. And things only get deeper when we find out that Kidou can only be reunited with his orphaned sister if he wins 3 football frontiers in a row. I hope this puts into context for you how serious youth football is in this world. This child can only live with his sister if he wins a football competition. And that fact seems to massively affect Endo, especially when he sees Kidou and Haruna arguing. So now we've got 2 things stopping us from watching this amazing game. Number 1 is the fact that Kageyama has planted some kind of trap for Raimon. And number 2 is Kidou and Haruna's fractured relationship, which is even affecting Endo. I have no idea when this show went from one person using another person as a baseball bat to something this serious, but it actually makes the upcoming game that much more entertaining. We've waited so long to get to this point. We've played countless matches, and now there's just 2 obstacles left. And luckily, thanks to Kageyama, we're able to knock the first one out pretty quickly as the game is about to kick off. Okay, I guess I was wrong. Youth football clearly is that deep, because this man just tried to kill a group of 12-year-olds by crushing them under steel beams. And if it wasn't for Kidou figuring out his riddle and warning Endo, they probably would have died. If you spit on gods, they'll rain on you later. I wonder how many people realized how literal that statement would turn out. But here's the thing, the writing in this show is somehow so good that there's still a second meaning to this statement. But for now, with him out of the way and almost every obstacle dealt with besides one, the match you've all been waiting for can finally kick off. And it's no wonder you guys voted this as the best qualifiers game, because so much happens. We start off by meeting the player who is known as the best keeper in the tournament, and he easily stops Dragon Crash with his power shield. And for all you Endo and Natsumi shippers, this line is super cute, but she can't have picked a worse time to say it, because my boy Endo is fighting his own demons and ends up messing up a pretty simple save. And he keeps on fumbling to the point Goenji has to save him with this tackle that should definitely be a red card. Like seriously, he comes in with both feet. He wasn't there to take the ball, he was there to take ankles, and it actually ends up with Kidou being injured. Now I know I've beaten this drum to death, but it's at times like this when the show's writing really shines, because it sets up this amazing interaction between Kidou and Haruna.
やっぱり私が邪魔なんだ。
一度もなかった。お前を忘れたことは一度も。
I genuinely have no idea why this show has such amazing dialogue, but we're about to see an even better scene with the debut of one of the most iconic moves in the entire series. And now the show is even adding lore. This move is called Emperor Penguin number 2. Why number 2? Glad you asked. It's actually super important to the plot, but I won't spoil it just yet. You'll have to wait until we make it to the Alias arc. But for now, let's get back to the game where Endo's team are literally putting their bodies on the line for him, and Domon takes a death zone to the face. I wonder if that makes up for him betraying everyone. Also, how is he alive? The net might be known as the strongest thing in the show, but I'd argue Domon's skull is a close second. And I guess Endo's stomach is up there too, because Goenji literally annihilates him with a fire tornado and pretty much tells him to get his shit together. And surprisingly, he does. This is the part where I couldn't decide if I loved or hated the writing. On the one hand, it was kind of underwhelming that all it took to clear Endo's head was a reminder that he loved football and the match deserved for him to give it his all. It's really sweet, but I also thought it was a bit simple. But that's the thing, Endo is simple, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He's the living embodiment of the spirit of the entire show. He has a childlike love for football similar to Hinata's love for volleyball or Bachira in Blue Lock. Yes, it might not have taken much to remove him from a pretty bad mental situation, but that's just the kind of person Endo Mamoru is. It doesn't take much for him to attack his problems head on, and I mean that literally, because he uses a new special move where he channels his inner Mike Tyson. And on the other end of the pitch, Goenji and Somioka are finally able to score with a very clever use of Dragon Tornado. And if you thought that was amazing, there's still one more absolutely ridiculous special move left for us to see. But before we get to that, Endo still needs to figure out a way to stop Emperor Penguin. So how do you think he does it? Maybe he uses a new technique, or maybe he notices a flaw in the shot that he can exploit. Well, the answer is yes to both, kinda. I'll be honest, I'm just glad they didn't pull the power of friendship bullshit on us. And just as the match is about to end, we get to see some new special moves, including Flurry Dash, Whirlwind Twister, and kicking the ball really high. Wait, what? Okay, that might have been the most hype moment in the entire show, because what on God's green earth possesses two kids, one of which is the goalkeeper, to jump off the stomach of their fat friend and score a synchronized overhead kick that cements their place in the football frontier? And if you thought that was hype, you have no idea what's left, especially one of the greatest matches in sports anime, where you'll find out why this statement is so clever. And to understand how we get there, let's start with a question. What is the greatest match in sports anime? There's countless amazing matches to choose from the Battle of Concepts in Haikyuu, to the Blue Lock 11 versus Japan's Under-20s, to Vorpal Swords versus Jabberwock in Kuroko no Basket, and even Jinga versus Ryuga in... There's so many reasons to love each of these matches, but I'm going to show you why Raimon versus Zeus is undeniably the greatest match in sports anime because of three very special things that happen in it. But these aren't the only things that make it an amazing match. And to show you what I mean, I'll also be comparing it to these games. And we'll start with the most important component in any climactic showdown: build up. There are a few key things that happen on Raimon's journey to the finals that all pay off when they play Zeus. And part of why this works so well is the same reason most of us love sports anime so much: the structure. Let me explain. This is everyone Raimon plays on their way to the finals against Zeus. And this is everyone Karasuno plays on their way to the finals against Shiratorizawa. See anything familiar? It's all just one big tournament arc. And there is not a single soul on this planet that doesn't froth at the mouth at the thought of watching a tournament. There's a reason the Champions League knockout rounds are so much more entertaining than the group stages. There's a reason the UA Sports Festival is one of the most loved arcs in My Hero. And there's a reason we all love Babe. This is a show about kids throwing spinning toys at one another, and yet it is so sick. Why? Tournament arcs. They make it so that anyone can lose. In fact, they make it so that almost everyone loses. And that massively increases the stakes, especially when the teams you care about actually lose. But a tournament arc alone isn't enough to keep things interesting, even with the promise of an epic final battle. There's another component that's just as key. And in Inazuma 11, this starts with the formation of the team itself. So why is this so important? Well, it goes without saying that everyone loves an underdog story. In Blue Lock, Isagi starts off as pretty much the worst player there, besides this guy. And he's also in the worst team, but that's what makes it so interesting. We wouldn't really care if he was one of the best players because there wouldn't be much room for growth. And that's what's so important here. The easiest way to keep someone's attention is through progression. If you're watching this video, it's because it's getting closer and closer to Raimon finally playing Zeus while covering important things that happen along the way for the game to make sense. And in the same way, putting Isagi right at the bottom is the best way we can see him progress. But there's more to it than just that. Raimon are as underdog as they come. They were barely able to string together 11 players to play in their first match, and they still ended up getting piped 20-1.
20-1, look at the top.
But the key here is how they struggled to even get enough players in the first place. If Goenji hadn't magically spawned a pair of shorts, they'd be screwed. Seriously though, where did he get these shorts from? And I wonder where else we've seen a team struggling thanks to not having enough players. And these aren't the only sports anime that have used this trick. In Haikyuu, Karasuno start out pretty bare bones with Nishinoya and Asahi joining the team 9 episodes in. By putting the team we care about at a disadvantage, it just makes us care about them more. We desperately want them to win, and it's even better when they don't. I'd argue it's far more interesting seeing the protagonists lose than it is to see them win. And we've seen this quite often, with Team Z losing their first game and Karasuno losing to Seijo. But Inazuma 11 approaches things a little differently. In Haikyuu, Karasuno are able to reinvent and redeem themselves by eventually beating Seijo and cementing their spot in the finals against Shiratorizawa. Now, I personally like this second Seijo match even better than the actual final, but that might be because I love Oikawa. And Blue Lock actually does something similar. While Team Z don't have another chance to play Team X, Isagi is still able to get his revenge against Barrow in the 2v2s. Hell, even Jenga gets his ass kicked by Ryuga before finally beating him. And we see the same thing in Inazuma 11. Kind of. Raimon are eventually able to beat Royal Academy thanks to the goalkeeper and striker jumping off the stomach of their fat friend and scoring a synchronized overhead kick.
Wait, what?
Now, this game is easily the second best game in Season 1, with only the Zeus game being better. But I'd argue these matches do more for Royal than they do for Raimon, and by comparison, they make the Zeus game even better. We know that Royal Academy are crazy strong. They've won the football frontier 40 years in a row. Granted, most of them were likely because of their coach's dirty tactics, but that wasn't the team's fault. The team themselves are actually quite likable, even this guy. And that's what makes it even better when they get utterly destroyed by Zeus. Seriously, they got slapped up so bad they had to call it quits before the second half even started. In fact, Zeus are so powerful that they've never even played a second half before. This isn't to say that Royal's only purpose is to get annihilated so we know how strong Zeus are. The Royal match and the build-up to it have some of the best moments of Season 1. The show just makes great use of this opportunity in a similar way to how Seijo have never been able to beat Shiratorizawa, and that's what's so important. Haikyuu is the king of character dynamics, and by using Ushiwaka's blunt nature to badmouth Seijo, they set his team up as this final boss to the point the intro to the show literally portrays him as a mountain that the team have to climb over. And that's what's so important. In any final battle, it's the protagonist's job to overcome their enemy, and that process usually begins by first tearing down the characters we care about, and that brings us to Endo's struggles. You'd think that after all the character development he went through during the Royal Academy match, the show would finally give him a break, but this positive ball of energy is put through hell both before and during the Zeus game. You see, while Raimon are undeniably the underdogs, Endo is probably the best goalkeeper in the tournament. I've said this countless times, but he is literally the Lionel Messi of goalkeepers, saving his team to the point his hands stop working. There literally isn't a move as powerful as his God Hand, which has pulled his team out of trouble again and again, but eventually it breaks. Now you might be asking, Mokka, what kind of shot can break through such a powerful move? Surely it must be pretty epic, right? Well,
everybody knows, and no there's a slow as killing as they froze. I don't know, but I know I am just cold.
between this and the utter gutsiness bat, I can't decide which move is more ridiculous. But the point is, God Hand wasn't strong enough against Triangle Z, and according to Kidou, Zeus have even more powerful shots than that.
Whoa.
Now I know what you're thinking. Didn't this guy play for Royal Academy? What's he doing in the Raimon team? Well, that's actually a pretty interesting story. And don't worry, I'm not going to bore you by recapping what happened. Psych, I don't give a shit what you think. Now get dunked on by Endo stopping Emperor Penguin and beating Royal so that Raimon officially enter the football frontier where they first play Shuriken, a team of ninjas that actually use tactics for a change. This is a surprisingly good game where we get to see the wall, which is one of the most iconic defensive moves in the show, and Kazamaru drops a generational masterclass that even puts Messi against Madrid to shame. We then learn Royal got destroyed by Zeus and all the players are injured besides Kidou, who missed the game because he hurt his foot against Raimon. He ends up joining Raimon to get revenge, and they play Farm, who have never conceded, except they end up conceding as we get to see the Inazuma break, another iconic special move. Then we meet Ichinose, who is Domon and Aki's friend from the States, who is supposed to be dead but turns out he's not dead, don't ask why, and he teaches the team Tri-Pegasus before joining Raimon as they play Kirkwood, Goenji's old team. And this is where Endo's God Hand finally cracks into tiny little pieces, but that's nothing compared to how it shatters his confidence. And that brings us to Endo desperately trying to learn a legendary goalkeeping move created by his grandfather called Majin the Hand. Now, if you didn't know, Majin means devil, and you'll see a lot of this sort of symbolism throughout the show, which sounds really bad, but it's actually pretty sick, so I can't complain. Anyway, this move is supposed to be the strongest goalkeeping move ever. But the problem is, Endo is really struggling to learn it to the point that even Aki notices.
あんな遠藤くん見たことない。
I mean, that's just a lie, isn't it? She saw him upset when his friend wouldn't be allowed to stay with her brother if Raimon beat Royal. Yeah, that's right. In this anime, a children's football match determines if two siblings are allowed to stay together. Those are the kind of stakes we're dealing with. And if you want to see even crazier stuff happen in season 2, like a literal alien invasion, make sure to subscribe. And speaking of stakes, just in case you weren't sure just how important it is for Endo to learn Margin the Hand, the anime decides to just straight up show us by introducing us to a character that almost everyone loves. There's actually 2 players in Inazuma 11 fans literally salivate over. You'll meet one of them in season 2, so stay tuned for that video. But for now, meet the captain of Zeus.
Puis tout s'effondre quand il n'est plus là. J'aimerais tellement lui dire, mais je n'ose pas.
Now, I'm going to casually gloss over the fact that this kid just stopped 2 shots at the same time despite not even being a goalkeeper. I don't quite think you understand just how much aura this guy has. It's as if the makers of the show wanted to create the biggest Giga Chad in the series. They even give him 2 of the craziest special moves. But you'll have to wait until the actual match for that because there's no way he's using either of those against a kid that can barely stand up. Do you understand what kind of a top G you need to be to walk into your ops yard and look everyone in the eye as you knock their captain out? And then he straight up just disappears like he's Gilgamesh from Fate. Introducing Aphrodite at this point is pure genius. Up until this point, we've only heard how good Zeus are, but now we finally get to see it. It's pretty similar to how Blue Lock is able to show us how good Rin is just by him kicking the ball twice. And this is something that's really needed. You can't have a match without someone to root against. In Haikyuu, that was done in the form of Ushiwaka, who they pretty much make out to be the final boss. He's strong, powerful, intelligent, athletic, and has seemingly endless stamina. Just think about what you see in that final game. Hinata's declaration of war, Nishinoya's persistence, the third years giving it their all for what could be their final ever game and the greatest moment of the season. All of these moments are in response to pure, unadulterated strength. These moments would not have been the same if it were not for the utterly perfect writing that went into crafting a great antagonist. And in the same way, Aphrodite is exactly what Inazuma 11 needed. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty important for Endo to quickly learn Margin the Hand. But before I go into whether or not he's actually able to learn it, I want to point out 2 amazing lines of dialogue that just show you why Inazuma 11 is in S tier when it comes to sports anime. For starters, Endo thinks that if he has to keep relying on his team to save him, he's failing as both the captain and keeper. And this is amazing from both a character and a narrative perspective. And it's really important in the Zeus match. It speaks volumes of his character that the first thing he thinks about isn't his role as a goalkeeper, even though that's what he loves doing. It's actually his role as captain that's the most important to him. And this is actually one of the first times the show flat out mentions the fact he's the captain. Sure, it's obvious, because the show makes it obvious. It's not something that needs to be stated because almost every single interaction Endo has makes it so damn clear that he's an amazing captain. But that's also what makes it that much harder to watch him be so unsure of himself. And that's where the second amazing line of dialogue comes in.
でもあの笑顔を見るのはちょっと辛いな。笑顔。キーパーの責任、キャプテンの責任。あんなに笑顔が苦しく見える遠藤くんは初めて。
There's probably nobody better to understand how Endo feels than Aki. She's one of his closest friends and recognizes that he has to force a smile for the benefit of his team, and it only makes us feel that much worse for him. We're used to him being bubbly, cheerful, and hot-headed, but now he has to fake those things, and it just makes it tragic.
じいちゃん、マジンザハンドって何なんだよ。どうやったらできるんだ。
Now the show does balance this out with some more wholesome and light-hearted moments. We get to see a lot of the side characters shine as they try to help Endo learn Margin the Hand. And we get this lovely scene of Natsumi almost killing Endo with a rice ball she made and then calling him high maintenance. And we also get this scene of Ichinose showing complete faith that Endo will be able to learn the move even though he barely knows him. And that speaks volumes for the kind of character Endo is. And surely his friends are correct. Surely he can learn Margin the Hand in time, right? After all, he's one of the best and most talented players in the show. I mean, he's literally a part of 4 of the team's most powerful special moves, so he should be able to learn anything. And this actually brings me to a problem I have with how other people think of Endo. A lot of people are under the impression that he's remarkably talented because he's the grandson of the legendary goalkeeper Daisuke. Well, No. The most noticeable thing about Endo has never been his power or skills. It's his fighting spirit and love for football. His skill as a goalkeeper is something he developed through blood, sweat and tears because of his love for the sport. And yes, maybe he was born with a high potential for football, but there really isn't any way to prove that. Later on in the series, we see characters who are able to pick things up far quicker than Endo ever could. But the point is, he had to grind himself to dust to get to where he is now. So I'd argue Endo's real talent isn't how good of a goalkeeper he is, but is actually his love for football and an unyielding hunger to keep playing. And that's what makes it so painful when we see him doubt himself. We know how hard he's worked, but we also know that his God Hand, a skill that was once invincible, is now completely useless. Not only that, but he simply isn't good enough to learn his granddad's legendary move for one simple reason. He isn't his granddad, so he can't learn it. And that's heartbreaking.
Inazuma Eleven のおじさんたちが叶えられなかった夢を、俺たちは叶えたいんだ。
So that brings us to the day of the match, where Raimon still have no way of stopping any of Zeus's shots. And this is where the show dumps a lot on you, but it never feels like a lot because it's all just paying off things that were built up earlier. For starters, this is Raimon's ex-coach who was fired because he tried to murder the players. Yes, you heard that right. And he's currently on the run, not from the police, but from Kageyama, who has been the villain of this story from day one. Now you might be asking, what makes Kageyama so scary that this guy is literally wetting himself thinking about him? Well, let's recap what he's done so far. When we're first introduced to him, he steamrolls this unnamed school because they lost to Royal in a football match. After that, we learn that 40 years ago, he sabotaged the original Inazuma 11's team bus, severely injuring them so they couldn't make it to the finals. He then asked Raimon's old coach to do the same to them, but luckily he was caught by my angel Natsumi. He was then responsible for injuring Raimon's chairman, who is also Natsumi's father. And then he gave us this killer line which foreshadowed two things, one of which was the fact that he literally tried to kill the Raimon team by dropping steel girders on them. Come on, my guy. Is football really that deep? Apparently it is, because it brings us to the second meaning of this line. If you spit on gods, they'll rain on you later. Why is this so important? Because this guy is the coach of Zeus. Yes, you heard me clearly. He coaches the team that obliterated his old team to the point they were so injured they couldn't keep playing. And to finish things off, he orchestrated the car crash that left Goenji's little sister in a coma. That's right, this kid is so good that they had to try and kill his sister. And now you're thinking, yes, that's all pretty bad, but at least it can't get worse. Now, most people would call this guy stupid for telling Endo something so big before such an important match. And honestly, I wouldn't blame you. Except this is just another example of the show's excellent writing. His reasoning is actually really sound. He doesn't want Endo playing the game out of his hatred for Kageyama. He wants him playing out of his love for the sport. It's one last beautiful scene we get before we're thrown into non-stop action. Endo loves the sport and he'll never let anyone tarnish it for him. In that sense, he has something the original Inazuma 11 never had, a completely pure love for football. And the same thing goes for the rest of his team, and I really mean his team. He built this team from nothing, even when the school didn't acknowledge them as a club. Hell, even a lot of the players didn't consider themselves to be a proper football team. But Endo persisted and never gave up. And eventually, his love for the sport spread from one person to the next until he built a team capable of going up against the very gods themselves. But whether or not they actually do it remains to be seen. Also, how did everyone get into this flying stadium? Do they just have some kind of lift taking them into it? And how is this thing flying in the first place? But I suppose the better question is, are Raimon ready to fight Zeus? No, they are not. Zeus's team, who you can probably guess are based on the Greek gods, utterly destroy Raimon with ease as we finally get to see Aphrodite's special moves. And the first of which is just so damn badass. Do you understand how cold you need to be to literally snap your fingers and walk through the opposition, and after you're done, an actual hurricane blows everyone away? I remember first watching this match with my head in my hands thinking, nah, there's no way Raimon can win this. This is going to be a worse ass kicking than Vegeta versus Frieza.
Oh my god, you actually are crying.
And I'd like to say I was wrong, but just watch this. Have you ever seen a colder special move than that? This bro just grew wings, flipped his hair, flew into the sky and created a literal nuke before kicking it at this poor boy. And obviously God Hand can't stop it. This bullshit gymnastics routine managed to break through it. Obviously it stood no chance against an actual spirit bomb. But maybe it's not all bad. I mean, in football, it doesn't really matter if you concede as long as you score more goals than the opposition. Oh, yeah, we might be screwed, lads. Zeus score again and again, making it 3-0 and injuring 4 Raimon players, which means the only person left on the bench is... oh god. Now, I'm not gonna be too hard on this guy. Sure, he might have run away during Raimon's first ever match, but he did help them beat Otaku Junior High, and who am I kidding? This is gonna be a massacre. Look, I promise I have not edited a single thing about what you're about to see next. This is genuinely exactly as it happens in the show. So now Raimon are down to 10 men and have to somehow score 4 goals. And it actually could have been more, but Zeus stopped caring about scoring and literally just stopped bullying Raimon. And for the first time, Endo is the one that considers giving up, and it's actually his team that are there to support him. So with no other choice, Endo uses Majin the Hand, and obviously it doesn't work. Do you know nothing about creating tension? But apparently neither does the show, because Zeus take a water break midway through the half, which is super sus. Naturally, Natsumi decides to investigate what's going on, and the girls find out that, I kid you not, Zeus are doping. These kids are like 13 years old and this man has them taking performance enhancing drugs. Someone please lock him up. But before you do that, wait just a little bit longer because the second half soon gets underway and Endo changes into his granddad's old gloves, which is actually pretty important because as he's getting bullied by Aphrodite, he notices this mark on the left glove and that changes everything. Was that not worth the wait or what? Inazuma 11 is the master of payoff. This kid just summoned a devil to stop a nuke and none of us questioned it because it's just so damn hype. But I'm well aware some of you want to know what the hell just happened, so I'll do my best to explain. Whenever Endo uses any kind of special move, he always uses his right hand, and he's been doing the same for Majin the Hand. The only problem is, this entire time, Majin the Hand is technically a left-handed move since it gathers power from the heart, which is on the left side of his body. His granddad found a way around this issue by first channeling the power from his heart into his left hand before transferring it to the right. And by spinning, he's able to maximize 100% of this power. Okay, for the record, I know this doesn't make any sense, but considering how sick this moment was, we can let it slide. And of course, stopping God knows is one thing, but they are still 3-0 down and there's still the issue of not being able to score. So let's see what the team do about that. This move to me perfectly encapsulates what Inazuma 11 is about and why it's so amazing. The reason this match is so good is because it's more than just an exciting showdown. It isn't just a final battle, it's a powerful testament to the enduring themes of teamwork and friendship that Inazuma 11 constantly reiterates. It's great to have shows like Blue Lock that break away from this cliche by highlighting the individuality in sports. And while that's a refreshing take, football at its core is a game built on teamwork, on the trust and the bond between players. And Inazuma 11 understands this better than anyone, and nowhere is this more evident than in this very game. We see the effect Endo's success has on the rest of the team. They've been with him every step of the way and they know how hard he's worked. And he hasn't just done it for his love for the sport, he's done it for them. And in turn, his team respond by combining their strengths in ways we've never seen before. What's so beautiful about this is that they aren't pulling out entirely new techniques. Instead, they are combining old ones. We've seen Fire Tornado and Twin Boost before, but we've never seen them used in this way. They've come this far not by relying on something new or unknown, but by trusting in each other and in the foundations they've built. And at the heart of this is Endo.
何度でも何度でも立ち上がる。倒れるたびに強くなる。お前は遠藤の強さにはかなわない。
Kidou's words beautifully capture this sentiment. He says that they're going to take the ball that Endo saved and score the winner. And that echoes back to their very first game against Royal Academy, when Goenji felt that same drive to finish what Endo started. This shared desire to honor their captain by giving their all shows just how deep their bond has become over time. What makes this match so emotional is that it reflects the very essence of why we love team sports. How one person's courage can inspire an entire team, and how, in the end, it's not individual talent that wins the day, but the combined will of a group united by a common goal. And nowhere is this more evident than when Raimon scored a winning goal. We have Domon, who started off as a spy with the intention of betraying Raimon, and Ichinose, who clawed his way back from a terrible accident because of his love for football. And we have the boy who brought them all together. And finally, we have Goenji. The boy that scored Raimon's first ever goal is now scoring their last. And that's why Raimon vs Zeus is the greatest match in sports anime, because it reminds us of why we fell in love with this show in the first place. But even without this game, there's still so many more reasons to love Inazuma 11. And if you want to see a video on a more modern sports anime, click the video on the left to find out how Blue Lock dominates sports anime. Thanks for watching.